Okay, I attended the Rosedale Union School District board meeting last night, November 13th. The meeting started at 7 o'clock and they just opened up, did a welcoming, a flag salute. The board discussed the agenda for the night. Um, and then the superintendent gave some updates. And then a student body representative from Rosedale Middle School um, just gave a little welcoming talk um, and talked about her school a little bit. And then they honored two teachers' aides that were retiring that had been working in the school district for a long time. They just talked about their career and how much they valued them and gave them a little bell as a retirement gift. After that, there were three, I'm not sure if they were teachers or on the board, but three people that gave a presentation on their three big initiatives. Um, and those three initiatives were explicit direct instruction, RTI, and professional learning communities. The first one, explicit direction instruction, they talked about the different tiers of learning, tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. They talked about how most students are in the tier 1 and the components of explicit direction, which are to state the learning objectives and activate prior knowledge. They discussed how in the explicit direct instruction they want to implement in their schools that teachers need to do the I do portion, and then a guided practice, which is the we do, and then independent practice, which is you do. Also for explicit direction, teachers should have a checklist that is clearly posted and has specifics on it for the lessons so that students, and that it's in a language that students can understand so they know exactly what the objective of the lessons are and what they need to do. And then they talked about the second one, RTI, which is response to intervention. Sorry, I blinked. So they talked about RTI and how the fact that a high level of learning is the responsibility of schools in their district, and that for all the different tiers, so you have the tier 1, which is most students, and then tier 2s, which students that need additional support. Each of those tiers, there needs to be guided questions to ask at all tiers so that they are making sure that students are getting their specific needs met. So they talked about each of those tiers and how explained that tier 2 students would need, additional support, maybe work in a small group or have set aside some time for a little one-on-one instruction. And then talked about how tier 3 was a little bit more intensive and maybe would involve like pull-out programs for students that needed even more support. And then finally, tier 4 would be students with disabilities generally and that require IEPs. The third big initiative that they discussed at the board meeting was professional learning communities, and the fundamental purpose of these communities is to learn, and talked about creating a collaborative culture. So basically just the importance nowadays of teachers and faculty working together, and that it shouldn't be as isolated as it once was. It just helps when all teachers are on the same page and collaborate on the lessons they're working on, and that those lessons maybe relate across the board as much as they can. Maybe the English standards will tie into a history report that they're writing. And then, so after that, their presentation on the 3 big initiatives they had for their school district, the superintendent talked about funding for the schools that they were going to be getting after the passing of, I think, Proposition 30. He just talked about how they won't see that money for probably 2 more years, but just knowing that that money is going to come in was a big relief for them, and they did not feel the need. They said that there was probably not going to be a need to cut many people this year. They only had to cut a few because they've been doing really well with their budgeting, but it should be even less, cutting staff, and hopefully that they will receive more funding for students who need tutoring through the Sylvan Learning Center. So that was basically what they talked about the rest of the time, was just kind of how that money is going to be spent, where it's going to go. They talked about a few things they, passed yay or nay, and it went pretty quickly. And that was it for the meeting. One area that I tied of that board meeting to an area of history was when they were just talking about the passing of Prop 30, and that they were going to be receiving that money. I tied it to the area of history where they had the Kalamazoo case that was decided in Michigan in 1873, and that case upheld the use of tax money to support common schools, which common schools back then were like public schools now. So because of since then, now we're able to use that money that we receive publicly, is drawn out of people's paychecks through their taxes, is going to support schools and helps to fund that. And so as I was reading over the history, I thought that was something that kind of stood out and definitely related to what they talked about in the meeting. And that is all.